Welcome to Mr. R's art class. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thumbs, subs, and ring that bell. In this video, I'm going to show you how to block print. There's a few different steps if your design is an image or if your design has some words or letters to it. I'll quickly go over the process for a design that has just an image in it, and then I'm going to go more into depth in this video for a design that has words and letters inside of it. So what you're going to need are some blockings. Right here I have blue, yellow, red, black, and white. So in this video I'm going to show you how to block print. The process is a little bit different if your design has just an image inside of it as opposed to a design that has some letters or words inside of it. So there's a couple extra steps for your design if it has some words or letters for it, and the process is a little bit simpler if your design is just an image and you don't care if it's flipped or reversed when we actually put it on the stamp or from the stamp into a piece of paper. The materials that you're going to need are some block inks. So over here I have blue, yellow, and red, the primary colors, and then I also have some black and white, which will help make those colors a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. Then I have a roller, a couple different sizes of carvers, a permanent marker, a regular pencil, a rubber stamp, a couple extra sheets of paper to put our design on, and then a tracer for your design if it has words or letters on it, and then a board to actually roll the ink on top of when we're ready for that. So I'm going to quickly go over how to transfer a design if it's just an illustration onto a rubber stamp, and then after that I'm going to go into further detail of how to transfer a design if it has some words or letters to it. So for this project, because our rubber stamp is 6 by 4 inches, our design needs to be a little bit smaller than 6 by 4 inches. We don't want to go all the way to the edge here. So what that means is even if you're just doing an illustration and it doesn't have any words or letters to it, it still needs to be a little bit smaller than 6 by 4. Same thing with your letters or words. And so what that means and what that would look like if you're doing a printed document is that you should be able to fit that same image, that same design side by side, and you should be able to fit 4 of those on a regular printed sheet. So when you're printing it out, if you're using a computer, you're printing your design out, you should be able to fit 4 of them on one sheet of paper. If your design is just an image, you don't need a tracer. The tracer is going to be for the process if you have letters or words for it. So if your design is just an image, all you have to do is just go on the back side of your printed image, and you're going to go ahead and place some pencil. So you can use a regular number 2 pencil, and you're going to apply pencil to the back of your image. You could go horizontally, and once you go horizontally, you could go vertically, just to make sure that you have plenty of graphite on the back of your printed image, and that you get a nice clean transfer from this piece of paper to your rubber stamp. And then you can also go diagonally. The only benefit for having a tracer if you're doing an illustration is to make sure that your graphite is actually covering your whole design. So if you take a look at this top left hand corner, my top of the tower here is not covered in graphite. So that's the only way that the tracer would be helpful for an image that doesn't contain any letters. So you can see here on the tracer that my whole area, my whole design is actually covered in graphite. So you're actually able to move on to transferring this image onto the rubber stamp. So from there you could go ahead and get your rubber stamp. You can flip over your illustration. If you like, you could get a couple extra pieces of masking tape and tape down your design so that your design doesn't move around. You can actually just do maybe one side of your design so you can actually peek through and make sure that your image is getting transferred properly. So you could start going around your design, and you're just tracing around the outside of your design. You don't have to shade anything in. Okay, so the tape is there so we could actually peek through this design, and you can see here that the design's been transferred to the rubber stamp with the pencil, with the graphite. And so that's why we put the graphite on the back side of our design, so we could actually flip over the image and draw on top of the printed side where all the details are at, and actually transfer over the graphite from the back of the printed image onto our rubber stamp. So now at this point you have to kind of figure out, what are you going to carve out? Are you going to carve out the city, or are you going to carve out the area around the city? So whatever you're going to carve out is actually going to be the color of the paper. If you don't carve something out, it's actually going to be raised up, and that's what's going to accept the ink, and that's what's going to get transferred over to your blank sheet of paper. So before you start carving out, think about what you want the ink to actually be applied to and what you do not want the ink to apply to. At this point, if you want, you could use a permanent marker, and you could take your printed image off of your rubber stamp and go around your design. This is going to help your design stick in place in case while you're working with the carver, maybe your hand or your palm could actually get rid of your design. So this actually helps your design stand out a bit, and also prevents your design from being kind of moved around or faded away. This also lets you know what you've carved and what you haven't carved yet if you have a complicated design. So anything that might be black still might need to be carved out depending on what you decide to do. So the only reason why I'm applying the permanent marker is to actually make my design stand out a little bit more, as opposed to just having pencil on there that might get moved around if I have my palm on it or my hand. So if you're just doing an illustration or an image, you're ready to go ahead and start carving out. If your design has some words and letters to it, there's a couple extra steps, and that's what I'm going to get into right now. In this video, I'm going to show you how to transfer a printed image that has letters or words on it from the piece of paper onto the rubber stamp. First thing you're going to do is going to go over to the tracer, turn the tracer on, get your printed image that has letters or words on it, and flip it on the blank side, and go ahead and start tracing all of your letters on the blank side of your piece of paper. So for my design, that's going to end up looking like this. Once you traced all your letters or words, you no longer need the tracer. From here, you go ahead and flip your design over to the printed side of the image, and what we're going to do here is we're going to cover the whole printed side with graphite. So you could go in a horizontal direction, then a vertical direction, and a diagonal direction, just making sure that you have the whole part of your printed design covered with graphite, covered with pencil. Once your design's covered in pencil, it should look something like this. So my whole design's covered in graphite, and I went in different directions. I went horizontally, vertically, and diagonally to make sure that my whole design is covered in graphite. So the back side looks like this, where my letters are actually outlined in graphite, and then on the printed side, my whole design is covered in graphite. The next step is to get your rubber stamp and to place the printed part of your design facing the rubber stamp. The part facing you should be the letters that you trace backwards. You could grab a piece of tape to help place your design and keep it in place while you trace your design backwards onto the rubber stamp. So the reason why you're using the piece of tape is so that your image stays still, your printed image stays still, and you're also able to kind of peek through the other side and make sure that your design is being transferred properly. After you trace over your letters, you can go ahead and take your design off. And from here, we're going to go ahead and start carving our design. So just like the other stamp where there's an illustration or a printed image, you have to decide what you want to be carved out and what you do not want to be carved out. Anything you're going to carve out is going to be the color of the paper. Anything that you do not carve out is going to accept the ink, is going to get ink on it, and is actually going to be the stamp that is applied to the blank sheet of paper. So this is what my stamp looks like after I'm done carving everything out that I wanted to. So I carved out the inside of the letters M, the lowercase r, the uppercase R, and then the lowercase s over here, along with the outline of all these other letters. So everything that I carved the inside out of, along with the outline of these letters, all that would be the color of the paper. Anything that I didn't carve out is going to be the color of the ink that I choose. On a couple of these letters I used permanent marker. That's just helping me to see what I've carved out and what I haven't carved out. I was also having trouble kind of seeing some of these letters, and so you could use the permanent marker to kind of help you actually see your design. When you're using the carvers, make sure you're using them at an angle, at a very slight angle. On some of these letters, what I kind of did is kind of scratch the surface here, just barely scratch the surface, and then I came back a second or third time to kind of go a little bit deeper on some of these lines here. And you want to be careful when you're using these carvers because it can slip and it can cut or poke you, so you want to make sure that you're carving away from you, that your hand's off to the side, and you're also not carving towards you. So once you have everything carved out, you're actually ready to go ahead and start applying ink to your stamp. So you don't need too much ink, you just need a small amount here, and a small amount will go a long way. You're also going to need your roller. So when you're using your roller, the idea is to actually cover a small thin layer on your roller, and so with your paint you're going in one direction, so you're either going vertically and then you're going to go ahead and change the direction and go horizontally, then vertically, and you're just trying to create a thin even layer on your roller. So we just started out with a small amount of ink, and the idea is not to cover your whole surface here, your whole board here with ink. You're just covering a small piece of your board, maybe about the same size of your stamp, and making sure that you get a nice even layer on your roller. So you can see the roller there, it's entirely covered in the ink. So from there you could go ahead and start applying the roller to your rubber stamp. So let's go ahead and cover our stamp. And so you could cover your stamp in the same way that we covered or spread out the ink on our board. If you need more ink, you could come back to the ink that's on your board. And so right now I just have one layer of ink on my stamp, and so you can kind of see some areas here where you actually see that the rubber is still and not the ink. So you could go over here on a different direction on your stamp and maybe apply a little bit pressure to your rubber stamp here. Come back over to your ink, put some more ink on your roller, come back over to your stamp and try to put more ink on the stamp. So again, we just used a small amount. We started with a small amount of ink to begin with. So you can really see which areas have ink, which areas do not have ink. So anything that does have ink on it, we didn't carve it out. Anything that does not have ink on it, we carved out. So let's go ahead and grab a piece of paper. So let's go ahead and grab a piece of paper. And you want to make sure that you center that piece of paper on top of your stamp as best as possible. Then what I'm going to do is go ahead and apply pressure with my knuckles all around the piece of paper here. And it's okay if you get some ink on the back of your piece of paper. And so again, the more time that you spend applying pressure, going around the whole back of your stamp here, the better your stamp is going to turn out. So you would spend a little bit more time actually applying pressure with your knuckles before you turn your paper around. So let's see how mine turns out. So you actually do get some white spaces here. So you want to make sure that you actually spend a little bit more time than I did applying pressure all around your stamp once your piece of paper is downward. So remember, the reason why we did this process and the reason why our letters are backwards is so that once we put our piece of paper down, that our letters are in the correct position and it actually spells out what we're trying to spell out. So remember, when we carved out originally, our design was backwards, and again, that's to help us actually move our design into the correct position once we transfer it onto the blank sheet of paper. So if you have any questions about how to make a stamp, how to transfer your design from a blank sheet of paper, from the printed image onto the rubber stamp, go ahead and let me know. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And feel free to watch any of the other related videos.